Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I thought I would sit down this morning and do a video for you guys. Alright. So this is a response to one of the whole threads that I had on my channel last night and this morning. And I had some people chime in, and there were multiple people saying, well, this is fact. And what's crazy to me is that these people, number one, don't seem to understand what this data is that they're looking at. I'm actually familiar with it. I have read all this stuff. I am familiar with all the anthropology involved with our speciation into Homo sapien, what we know from the fossil record as far as historical diets, things like that. And so and I've discussed these things in detail in the videos. So to me, it's always interesting that people act like I'm not aware of this stuff. It's comical. But I'm going to jump into a minute the whole hyper carnivore thing, and people are missing the point that that's not our species, first of all. We'll jump to it in a minute, but that's what we need to understand, because I mean, the person led off with, I bet you don't even know what early man, and I assumed he was talking Homo sapien at that point, because I replied with what we know. This is the problem with why we make fun of the paleo diet as being historically accurate. Okay? Here's why. When we do find Paleolithic humans, that's what we're finding humans before the last glacial period. And again, by human, I mean Homo sapien, not other hominids. I think it's a stretch to call other hominids humans, but you know, some experts do that. But I'm talking specifically Homo sapien as the species that is genetically what we are today. Okay, Homo sapien. When you find those Paleolithic humans with an intact GI tract, they always include grains, almost always, like 90% of the time. There's grains, there's usually root vegetables, usually plant matter, and bugs. Now, that being said, it's like when you mention the bugs, other people get upset. Like, I don't want to eat bugs, so I'm not going to eat bugs. I don't care. I'm not interested in it. To me, it's gross. You know, to each your own. But I don't eat shellfish and stuff either. Lobster's just a roach. But I digress. That'll probably be the only thing people take from this whole thing. They're going to ignore all the other stuff, and they're going to say, oh, Blaha called lobsters roaches, and they're going to make 37 videos about it. But that is what we find in their GI tracts. Homo sapien has never been a hyper carnivore. We have eaten whatever we can find. That is why our species has thrived the way that it has, is that we have had the ability to cook and prepare, and we're intelligent enough to figure out how to make everything around us edible. We've learned how to process whatever we find, cook it. And no, these people are like, oh, they eat all. No, humans, Homo sapien is not a raw meat eater. That's complete nonsense. Again, they're referring back to Homo erectus, not Homo sapien. They had a different stomach acid acidity than we do, just like a lot of predators do. They have a higher stomach acidity. They can handle the bacteria in raw meat better. We don't handle it that well. We are cooked food eaters, by and large, other than, you know, fruits and some vegetables. But the cooking was a big part of the development of our brain, and we know this. And we are a starch-based species. Starch will always be the primary fuel source of Homo sapien, because that's what we've adapted to eating, and then we fill in the gaps with other stuff. So let's get over to what these people are talking about. They're talking about records going back millions of years, 1 million, 2 million. Homo erectus was the longest lived hominid, okay? And even if we follow what evolution theory shows on it, we're not we didn't come directly from them. There was another intermediate step. But Homo erectus was the longest lived hominid, okay? They have died out. And so they're saying, but they were hyper carnivores. They lived on a meat-heavy diet. They ate everything around them, but it was also a different time period. Their population was low enough, and there was a large enough number of large land animals, again, mammoths, bisons, things like that they did thrive on those. And they pack hunted them, they hunted them, and they ate a very meat-heavy diet. All right. Things to keep in mind, their brain was still smaller than ours. They still had less muscle and stuff than us. keeping in mind they averaged anywhere from, they're noting about maybe 5 foot up to about 6'1". They never got above 150 pounds, and that was the largest males. So again, people were over here talking about trying to do this sort of diet to gain muscle or whatever. I mean, you're using your model as a species that never got over 150 pounds, even when they were over 6 foot. Just put that in perspective. But their stomach acidity was different. Their brains were considerably smaller. So keep in mind, this is a species that we don't know if they were even capable of speech or not. This is still debated as to whether they just used some form of pseudo communication because they clearly worked in packs, or whether they could actually verbalize language. We're not still sure if they could actually talk. But they did have, body language and things like that, we think, because they were able to, again, pack hunt. And they were hunters. Yeah, they were hyper carnivores. But that's not human. That's not what we think of as a modern human. It's a different species. In fact, it's not even a direct, this is, the next species up. There was another one in between that. All right. Here's the problem with that. People will look at that and say, so then, we're meant to be hyper carnivores. Well, no. Number one, it's a different species with different stomach acidity, different brain, everything else. This is not the same species as us. So that's irrelevant in terms of what we should follow. Furthermore, looking at a record like that is not how you determine what is optimal for us. Because quite frankly, we live longer. We live longer than even Paleo man did in our own species. So you need a context for that. What you use to determine what is ideal, we look at epidemiology, we look at metabolic ward studies. Furthermore, we have changed and adapted to agriculture. All right, it has affected our gene flow. Again, agricultural society for thousands and thousands of years has impacted our gene flow and our genome. We've adapted to that very, very well. So when people want to use other records, keep in mind, just like we see the same thing in dogs. I mean, that's a perfect example for people who don't get it. All dogs were once wolves. All right? Hopefully we all understand this. We know that the enzymes responsible for breaking down starches in a dog's stomach and gut are at 40 times the rate of a wild wolf. 40 times as much, because we've domesticated them, and this is how their gene flow has adapted to the environment of being fed human food. So what people need to be looking at for optimal diets is, what do we see in epidemiology in humans? What do we see in the lab in current humans? We're an omnivorous species who thrives on a starch-based, plant-heavy diet. And that is pretty much overwhelmingly true in the research and data. That's not even really a point of real contention at this point. And whatever Homo erectus ate 2 million years ago isn't relevant to what you as a modern Homo sapien that is descended from hundreds of generations in an agricultural society should be eating for either optimal health or for optimal body composition. It's irrelevant. It's not even a sound argument. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. Hope it's been informative. I'll talk to you guys next time.